behind the different world religions, there is a single root. That teaching is basically all is one. And there is also what they call the illusory world, which is the world of the ego, and which is basically this world in which we experience being human.
So today we have a spiritual journalist, AJ Parr. I believe you've written about 20 books, if I understand correctly, on really comparisons between the main world religions and NDE accounts, which I find really fascinating, and hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss further today. You also had a near-death-like experience in 1991. For those who don't know, a near-death-like experience is just like a normal NDE, but it doesn't require an event of a physical death or clinical death, if you like.
Right, Dani, how are you? And it's a pleasure to be here. Well, I think I stopped breathing, and because when I came back, the first thing I did was gasped for air. But since I cannot prove it, and I prefer to call it a near-death-like experience. It happened, like you mentioned, in 1991. I woke up in the middle of the night. I guess it was around 3 a.m., something like that. And when I opened my eyes, it was pitch black. I could not see anything. So I looked around, and it was so dark that I impulsively raised my hands and put them in front of my eyes, and I couldn't even see my hands. So it was really impressive. At first, I was really shocked, but then almost immediately, I thought to myself, what if someone or something is hidden in this darkness? I would never know, you know? So it's like when you're a kid and you go to a black room, a dark room, you start imagining things. So I immediately imagined the possibility that there could be someone or something hidden, because it would be impossible to detect. Then I started, as soon as I thought that, I started feeling a presence. But I didn't know if it was my imagination or not. At first, I got really scared. And then I heard a voice. So I was right. This voice said, "Surrender, all is one." And I simply obeyed. I did not decide to relax. I did not decide to surrender. I simply did. I relaxed entirely. As soon as I did that, I felt my chest begin to expand. There was like a feeling of emptiness within my chest, and it started expanding, growing. It grew larger than myself. It grew larger than my house. It grew larger than everything that surrounded me. And it grew so large that all of a sudden it exploded. I don't know how to describe it, but I suddenly appeared in what seemed to be the middle of a star. And in this middle of the star, I could see up, down, to the right, to the left, in all directions at the same time. But there was, in the middle, there was only light. You see, if you right now could see upwards and downwards, to the right and to the left, you would see yourself in the middle, right? I mean, your body would be in the middle. But back then, at that moment, there was only light. So I really didn't think, I didn't really remember I was human. I was simply there experiencing or being aware of this light. And I think it happened like simultaneously, but I can only refer it in linear time.
Yeah.
But I could see the center of this star, which was basically an empty feeling and pure light. I could also see the rays extending infinitely in all directions. I could also see each ray, and I could sense that each ray occupied an empty space, and I saw that surrounding each ray there was a tiny empty space separating one ray from the ones next to it.
Oh, wow.
So I could feel that I was there occupying an empty space, which I was also that. And also it was empty and also full of light. So I felt at the same time both empty and full. That's the only way I can explain it. It's something like when you pour water into a glass, the only way you can do that is if the glass is empty. So that empty space, I realized, is necessary for things to exist. I could also feel that since this sun or star extended infinitely, I felt that I was one with everything. And I also felt that it extended and covered the whole universe or the whole reality.
Wow.
So I felt one with everything. Like I said, I don't remember being human. At the time, I didn't think. I just felt, or I was present. I was like, I can only describe it as being pure consciousness. And I don't know how long I stayed there. It seemed, endless. But all of a sudden, I woke up in my bed. I gasped for air, and I held my head in my hands, and I said, "Wow, what just happened?" I couldn't believe it. And the memory was so fresh that it made me feel that I was still there. I mean, I could imagine, or I could remember being there, and I couldn't understand why I could see in all directions, because in this 3D world, you can only,
Right.
you either look in front of you or you turn your head and look backwards. But this was something unbelievable and something that I had never imagined or I had never perceived. But this was so vivid, and the feeling, the sensation that I had been, or that I was one with everything, persisted. So I got up from my bed really confused, and I looked around me. It was dark, but I could see everything that surrounded me. When you get up in your bed at night, you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that what I was seeing surrounding me was also part of me, because I could still feel that light emanating, and that everything that surrounded me was also part of me. So I instinctively walked up to the nearest wall, and I placed my hand against the wall, and I could feel my hand against the wall, but I could feel my hand pressing against the wall, but I could also feel the wall pressing back.
Wow.
So it was like having double consciousness. I could feel myself, but I could also feel the wall, and I realized we are not simply who we believe we are. I had that sensation that we are everything that surrounds us too. So I was really confused. I think these experiences are mind-blowing, and if you don't know anything about them, it brings a lot of confusion. So back then in 1991, there was no internet. There was basically not much information. Although there was some, I had no books talking about near-death experiences or those things. But I did have a good collection of spiritual books. Apart from the Bible, I had the Bhagavad Gita. I had some books by Sai Baba from Hinduism. I had some esoteric books. And I had a collection. I have the Tao Te Ching and different books from different religions. I had some books on Buddhism, the Dhammapada, which is one of the oldest collection of sayings from the Buddha. So I knew that this experience touched something very spiritual and something very real. It touched the essence of what reality is. But I could not understand it. So I spent the following 2 days. This sensation gradually faded. But I spent the following 2 days asking myself, what's going on? And I talked to God and asked him, what just happened? I don't understand, you know? And I was confused. It's not like these days that you have sharing groups and all that.
That's right.
I didn't know what to do. So I started reading the scriptures and talking to God. And 2 days later, I felt this presence. And this presence seemed to be like a very old soul, so old. It seemed to be so old that I started to cry because, wow, it was like seeing my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, very old, very wrinkled. I could not see him, but I could sense him, okay? So this being or this soul said a small poem, but he did not say it. I simply felt it like a download, okay? And this poem was very brief, but it was the answer that I was looking for. It was the explanation of what had happened. And also it was explaining a lot of things. So this is how it goes. In the beginning was the One, but the One was alone, and he wanted to play. So he divided himself into two, gave number two amnesia, and thus the game began. So as soon as I heard this, I realized that according to this message, we are all God, and that all is one. And the only way that God could experience the diversity found in this reality was precisely by dividing himself into infinite parts and forgetting that he was God. A lot of people say we are spirits having a human experience. I say we are God having a human experience. So really, we are God. And that is something that a lot of spiritual guides and founders of ancient religions have mentioned. Even Jesus said, I and the Father are one. And he talked about this oneness. And he also talked about this world as being an illusion. He talked, don't gather treasures in this world, gather treasures in the world of heaven, the realm of heaven. So there seem to be like two realities. The reality that we perceive as humans or as number two, and the reality of oneness, of God. So I started looking in the different scriptures, the different books I had. Like I said, there was no internet. There was no way to learn about these many things. But I did try to find what the different teachings said about the light and this feeling of oneness. And, you know, the Bible says, in the beginning was the light. And Jesus said, God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. So everything started to make sense. And when they talk about Jesus in the Gospels, they say that in him was life, and life was the light of all people. So this light that I experienced was also, like I said, I felt it like consciousness or pure awareness, but you can also describe it as pure life. Life. I was living there. I was alive. And one of the books I had was the Bhagavad Gita, which is from Hinduism, tells the story of Arjuna and Krishna having a conversation before a battle. And one of the things that Krishna says is that the sun is the symbol of the Supreme Self. So when I said, wow, the sun is a star. So I started to link what I was reading with my experience. There's also in the Upanishads, they say God is the light of all lights. So I started finding certain parts of the ancient scriptures that mentioned this light, as well as this oneness. In the Buddhists talk about the light of Dharma, and they also say that the essence of reality, they describe it as a clear light. So that also made sense. And in Judaism, the Kabbalah also recognizes God as the light that illuminates all. And there are certain parts in the Bible also that talk about God as light. In Sufism, which is the mystical branch of Islam, there's a poet called Rumi, a lot of you know him, and he says, the light of God is everywhere, but only the pure in heart can see it. There's another thing here, the heart, where I felt myself expanding in the middle of the chest. That's where your heart is. And in this star, when I, just like I mentioned, I could see up and down and to right to left. And in the middle, I had the sensation, the same sensation I had felt when my chest began to expand, and a feeling of emptiness or void. And this feeling, I can still feel it in my heart. I mean, if you ask yourself, there's a meditation by Ramana Maharshi, and you ask yourself a question and you don't reply it in words. And the question is, who am I? And you place your hand in your chest and you say, who am I? And then you start feeling your essence, and it's placed in your heart. In your heart, there's somehow the essence of who you are. So I continued finding coincidences or explanations in the ancient Taoist or Taoist teachings, which are contained in the Tao Te Ching. I also found that they mention the light as the essence of the Tao. It also says the Tao is the light that shines in darkness, and the darkness cannot overcome it. This is very similar to what was said about Jesus and the light, and God and the light in the Gospels. There's also something also interesting that the Chinese called the Tao. They gave the Tao another name too, which is the One. They talked about the One. So this is really amazing. And the first lines of the Tao Te Ching begin by saying that the Tao that you can mention, or the Tao that you can speak of, is not the Tao. So anything we can say about God or about the Supreme Being are simply words. The truth is ineffable. You cannot describe those higher dimensions using words. And truly, you cannot describe anything using words, just like you cannot describe the taste of chocolate to someone who has never tasted it, or how it feels to jump in a river or in a swimming pool if someone has never done it. You cannot even explain what love is or freedom. Those are abstract terms, and everybody has a different interpretation. But when it comes to something that you have never experienced, for example, a blind person, you cannot describe the color blue or the color red. So I started to understand that words are limiting. Words can be used, to communicate among us, but when it comes to transcendental things, they cannot really explain a lot of things because it's limited. That's why when people talk about God, some people say the One, others say the Supreme Soul, the I am that I am, the Alpha and the Omega, the Great Spirit, Source, Brahman, Allah, the Tao. They use so many terms because God really has no name, and we each interpret it in our own way. So I really found that the concept of the light and also the concept of oneness was present. And I spent the following decades studying different religions. I joined different groups, Buddhist groups. I joined Hindu groups. I joined the Gnostics. I read about the apocryphal Gospels, studied different religions. I learned transcendental meditation. I also learned about Silva mind control. And all of this proved that behind the different world religions, there is a single root. There is a single teaching. And that teaching is basically all is one. There is a non-dual universe or reality. And there is also what they call the illusory world, which is the world of the ego, which is the world of dualism, and which is basically this world in which we experience being human. And a lot of people, a lot of ancient spiritual scriptures and ancient spiritual masters have pointed out that this is an illusion. Some even go as far as to say, like these Zen Buddhist teachers, that this does not exist really. But I think it does exist, but it is a relative reality. The true reality is non-dual oneness. And this is the reality where we exist. According to scientific studies, we only perceive a small range of everything that surrounds us. And according to quantum physics, the universe does not exist or unless it is perceived or observed. So in reality, we are surrounded by pure energy or pure light. However, when we open our eyes and see something, what we see is not a true representation of what is there. Like I said, we can only perceive certain range, a small range of light waves or light particles.
Like,
When people observe the light, it becomes particle. When it's not observed, it's wave. But basically, when we open our eyes and see something, our eyes transform that into an electrical current that goes directly to the brain. And in the brain, we produce like a hologram or a dream.
Crazy, right? Yeah.
So what we're seeing when we open our eyes and look around is not really out there. We are creating that image within us. So that is also why people say that this is an illusory world. And not only that, we give meaning to everything. So when we see a chair, we call it chair and we think it's a chair, but no, it's wood or plastic or whatever in that shape. True reality has no words, no concepts. You can experience that when you go and see a sunrise, a beautiful sunrise early in the morning, and you have no words. You can only experience it, okay? So you can experience those non-verbal moments many times in your life. But most of the time, we are giving meaning to everything. This is a chair. I am AJ. You are Dani. But that is part of the illusory world. Eckhart Tolle explains it very clearly when he says that we have a chattering voice in our head, and that voice is always talking and talking endlessly. And that voice, due to that voice, you are convinced that you are Dani, which is good because
we need to survive.
The ego is necessary to survive. Right. If not, you just would die. So the ego is necessary. But when you think that you are only the ego, then you start getting in trouble. Because, if you think I'm Dani, I am worth, or I'm worth something, or I'm not worth anything. I am happy, or I am sad. I am successful, or I am a failure. It's an illusion that people have, which creates this human problem that we have always had, which is a non-tolerance and discrimination. So we think that people who are like us, okay, they're great, but we also think that people who are different from us are less than us. So all this originates from these words and these labels and this judgment, this endless chatter in our mind. And that's what basically Jesus said many times. He said, do not worry about how you dress. The birds in the field, when he talked about the birds in the field, is do not worry about what you're going to eat. The birds in the field, don't worry, and however, God takes care of them. And do not worry how you're going to dress. The lilies in the field, don't worry, and they are dressed better. They are finer. They have finer clothes than King Solomon. So he was also teaching, and Buddha too, that we create our own suffering. Okay,
basically we do. Yep.
with those thoughts. So by remembering that we are in essence God having this human experience, and by remembering that all is one, I have found that it's first that it's very interesting to study different religions, and second that they all basically say the same. So after doing this for many years, around 4 years ago, I met a near-death experiencer. I have a publishing company. I help people publish books, and she contacted me because she's from Spain. She had a book called 24 Minutes on the Other Side, and she wanted me to translate it into English. So, okay, I thought it was interesting. But then when I started reading it and translating it, I realized that she was the first person I had ever met who had had a similar experience than mine. Because when I was exploring different religions, I would always ask, for example, if I went to the Buddhist, I would always ask the person in charge, hey, I had this experience. Do you know what it is? And he said, no, no, no. But if you stick with us, you'll realize it sooner or later. And if you'll stick with us, you'll find the higher meaning of life. So, but they all said the same thing. Only us, only we are the only ones who have this path.
Truth, yeah.
Truth. So the only true path is ours. So it was kind of funny because every time I joined one of these groups, I said to myself, okay, I'm not going to be a fanatic. I'm just exploring, just researching. I'm not going to pay attention when they tell me that it's the only path. I will be here, learn all I can, and then I will get out of here. But by doing that, I could go to any type of ceremony from any type of religion, because I was basically researching. So going back to this Spanish near-death experiencer, she's called Tessa Romero. So we became friends. She's a journalist. I'm a journalist. So we started talking. And one day I tell her, hey, I had a similar experience, but I did not die. Or at least I don't know if I died or not. So I told her about my experience. And then she heard me and she told me, look, you know that dark place where you were when you opened your eyes and you could not see anything? That's called a void. It happens to a lot of people. People experience it differently, but it is a common element. And also the light, she experienced merging with the light. So she said, okay, that's also a common experience, because she had friends who had also had near-death experiences. And then she told me, look, when I was in the light, she said, I could also see in all directions at the same time. That's what near-death experiencers call 360-degree vision. So I was going, what? You know, I was really surprised because it seemed to be so common, and yet I had been looking for someone for years, but I was looking in the wrong place. I was looking in religions and spirituality, and I couldn't find anyone there. So since I'm a journalist, I decided, I knew that there were YouTube videos out there, and but I said, okay, I don't know if these people are telling the truth or who interviewed them. I don't know anything about them. So I'm going to start trying to locate people who have had near-death experiences, and I'm going to start interviewing them and do my own journalistic research. It took some time to find the first people. And I also started researching or interviewing near-death researchers. One of the first was Dr. Yvonne Kaysen. She created the term spiritually transformative experiences. And when I interviewed her, after the interview, she asked me, have you ever had a spiritually transformative experience? At the time, I had never shared my story with anyone. So when she asked me that, I had never heard that term. And I said, yeah, I've had, but you know, every time I share it with someone, it's hard. So she said, okay, I want to hear about it. I'm going to set up a meeting at the Spiritual Awakenings International, a private sharing session with you and some of the members of the board. And I had never shared my story in many years, 30 years, because I had never found anyone to share it with except Tessa Romero. And I did share it with my family members, but they believed I was crazy, or it was really hard. It was really hard. So after 30 years, thanks to Yvonne Kaysen, I went to this meeting. It was a Zoom meeting, and she was there with the board members. And then one by one, they started telling their near-death experiences. And they started telling amazing stories. So after hearing them, she said, okay, it's your turn. And when she said that, I felt like I was at home, because, these people are never going to believe I'm crazy, because they are even more crazy. One of them had 2 near-death experiences. Yvonne Kaysen had 5 near-death experiences. Oh, wow. And this was really incredible when I heard them share their experiences. So when I told them about my experience, they were really glad I did. They became my friends. So after that, I started going to the Spiritual Awakenings International sharing groups. And then I started going to the IANDS sharing groups. But the fact that I began to share my experience was very important. I never wrote about my experience in my books, and I still haven't.
Why is that?
I'm preparing it. But the last books, okay, in my last 2 books, which are about near-death experiences, I was still not convinced that I wanted to share my story in my books. Mm. But however, in my first near-death experience book, which is Stairway to Heaven, that book, the foreword was written by Dr. Melvin Morse, and he mentioned it in the foreword that I had a near-death-like experience. This is basically focused on Christian NDEs. They all have to do with Christian concepts, gods, angels. And the second book, which is The Girl Who Visited Heaven, this second book, the foreword is by Raymond Moody, which, he is the person who coined
the term
NDEs.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I started interviewing researchers. I have written many articles. I continue my research, and I came up with what is called the Tower of Babel theory, which I presented in IANDS.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
And this is my explanation, because when I started interviewing people, I found something really amazing. I've interviewed so far over 100 near-death experiencers. I have over 200 videos, so I have probably interviewed around 150 near-death experiencers. But I keep it at I say 100, because I haven't counted them. But one of these days I will. So the people I have interviewed, some of them have seen divine figures, religious figures. However, some have seen Jesus. Others have seen Mother Mary. Others have talked about Archangel Michael, Buddha, Shiva, Yogananda, Babaji, Saint Germain, Juan Jean, Native American elders, extraterrestrials, demons, and even underwater intelligent beings. Mm-hmm. So this blew my mind, because how can this be? Why? So I thought, at first I said, okay, this must be, the reason for this must be the cultural upbringing, okay? However, I also found atheists who had met God in their near-death experiences. I interviewed 2 Jews who saw Jesus in their NDEs, even though they did not believe in Jesus. the culture seems to influence the way people interpret. But what determines this? Because if someone who is an atheist sees God, or someone with a Jewish upbringing meets Jesus, someone they don't believe in, then why is this happening? So I had already thought about why religions are so different yet so alike.
Yeah.
That was something that was on my mind all the time, because I had found that religions share common roots. So I said, wow, the same thing is happening here. NDEs are very similar. They're very different, yet are very alike. This is something that Dr. Moody noticed in 1975. I'm not the first one to notice it. A lot of people have talked about it ever since, but I had the chance to evidence it during my interviews. So I started talking to different researchers, what they thought. Some of them said, yeah, the culture defines it. Some of them said, no, the culture doesn't define it. So when I was writing my first NDE book, Stairway to Heaven, I was going to the sharing groups, NDE sharing groups. And in one of these sharing groups, someone started talking about dreams and how they had contacted their deceived loved ones through dreams. And that moment, I remember a dream I had had 20 years earlier that I had forgotten. It was when my mother was about to die. She was in coma. And I had always thought it was a dream. I woke up in the middle of the night. I opened my eyes. I looked to my left, and there was my mother standing next to me. And she was supposed to be in coma in another city, in her house. So I see, Mom, what are you doing here? And she looked very young. I was surprised. I said, Mom, what are you doing here? And she said, they gave me permission to come see you. And I said, who gave you permission? The angels. The angels? Yes, they are taking care of me. And then she went on to explain that she was not fully dead.
If you don't mind me asking, did she wake up from the coma after
never.
that? Okay.
No. She never woke up. She died. So she told me that since she was not dead and her body was still alive, I mean, she was in this in-between world. And this in-between world, she explained to me, was related or was in relationship with the dream world. And she said, it's where the dream world and the spirit world meet. She also told me that they did not allow her to cross over until she died. And she also told me that they were taking care of her like she felt like she was a princess, that they were taking care of her in like this palace, and that there were angels there, and that I could go visit her if I developed my astral body. She used that word. And I said, how? And she gave me some instructions.
Right.
But they were very hard, and they required certain preparation.
Are you allowed to share with us? Okay.
No, she died before I could ever master them. When I remember that, I said, wow, now I know why NDEs are so different, yet so alike. As soon as I remember that. Why? Because I had studied that Carl Jung, when he studied dreams and mystical visions, he said everyone interprets the archetypes
See.
in their own way.
Yeah.
There are archetypes in the collective unconscious. When we dream, for example, with Jesus, everyone will see Jesus differently. Although it's the same archetype, it's the same energetic origin, we will each give Jesus a different face, a different hair color. And I have interviewed people, some say Jesus was blonde with blue eyes. Others say, no, he has dark hair and dark eyes. Others even said, one person even said he had white hair. So how can that be? I know that all these people are convinced that they met the real Jesus. However, they saw him differently. And when I remember my mother's dream, I said, wow, the key lies in the archetypes. Now I have to find, I know the answer, but now I have to find everything that Carl Jung said. And I had also started studying quantum physics. There's an effect called the observer effect. We mentioned it earlier that this world does not exist unless someone observes it, and it becomes real for that person. So I said, wow, it seems like there is also an observer effect in our unconscious. And that every time, and that when we observe these beings from higher dimensions, we give them shape unconsciously. So it's what I call an act of co-creation. And I don't talk about, I'm not the only one who talks about co-creation. This concept is used by a lot of people. And when I say co-create, I'm not saying that we are making it up. No, this is an unconscious process. And as the Course in Miracles explains, that when we co-create, we are not creating on our own. We are co-creating with whom? With God. So God is the creator, and we are the co-creators. When this observer effect, psychological observer effect, gives shape to these divine beings, we co-create the shape according to our, not only everything that we have experienced since we were born, but also according to our past lives, to all our spiritual memory. That's why someone who is an atheist in this life meets God, because they probably were devoted to God in previous lifetimes. And that's why someone who is a Jew meets Jesus, because they were probably followers of Jesus in past lives. So I started working on this theory. I call it the Tower of Babel theory, because when people perceive the spiritual world, everyone gets a different interpretation. So it's like climbing a tower. You know, the story of the Tower of Babel is there was a tower that they were building to reach heaven. However, God didn't want them.
You know, like that.
He didn't want everyone to be able to go to heaven. He made them speak different languages so they could not understand each other, and they never finished the tower. Okay, so I said, wow, this story is more or less the same of mystical experiences and NDEs. There is this tower. We climbed this tower through meditation, through NDEs, through psychedelics, and when we reached the top, we experienced something very unique, which is filtered through this observer effect. And when we come back, each one says a different story. No, I saw God and he was blonde. No, my Jesus had dark hair. And the other one says, no, what do you mean? I saw Buddha. The other says, no, I saw Krishna. And they each have a different interpretation of that superior dimension. And it's just like they were speaking different languages. So I said, wow, that's the hidden meaning of the Tower of Babel. God does not want people, greedy people, to climb this tower and automatically experience heaven. No. Heaven is something that cannot be accessed by everyone.
Yeah.
So he deliberately makes everyone speak a different language, or that's how it happens, so that scientists and all of them say, nah, they're probably hallucinating. You know, I don't know what the reason is, but this is all a speculation. I found that my explanation, when I presented this in IANDS, I focused on NDE research, interdimensional perception, quantum metaphysics, Jungian psychology, and non-local reality. Those are the 5 pillars of the Tower of Babel theory. I more or less condensed it here. I focus mainly on the archetypal influence.
Brilliant. AJ, well, first of all, thank you so much. We've been talking for over an hour and I haven't even started my questions. So I think that this episode is going to go as the longest that I've had so far.
Oh, wow, I didn't realize it.
So if you don't mind, let me ask a few questions. Let's see how far we go with that. So I'd love to ask you this question as someone that studied a lot of religions and seem to have grasped the idea that it seems really that all major religions are talking about the same things. But in some ways, as you mentioned, the interpretation is slightly different. So this is just a gut feeling, always meaning to ask you this. Do you feel that, could we go as far as saying that perhaps all major religions originated from accounts of near-death experiences?
Well, what I believe is that they all arise after the founder had a oneness experience, and this could be through an NDE, but also it can be done through meditation. It can be reached by
the use of psychedelics, perhaps.
Use of psychedelics in initiations. In ancient times, they used psychedelics to initiate people. It can also be done spontaneously. You can have a mystical experience. It can also happen through mystical dreams or lucid dreams. It can also happen through mystical visions.
Yeah.
People are simply walking and God appears to them, or Jesus. And they have these, basically they have this oneness experience. And some of them realize that they are God. But not that they are God, but that their essence is God. And just like Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is within us. The kingdom of God is within us. And just like Jesus said, I and the Father are one. And just like, I have a quote here. Let me see if I can find it. By Adi Shankara, who is the founder of the one of the branches of Hinduism. It's called Advaita Vedanta. It's the non-dual branch of Hinduism. I found it here, and I'm going to read it. Adi Shankara, he lived in the 8th century of this era, and he said the following: I am reality without beginning. I have no part in the illusion of I and you, this and that. I am one without a second, bliss without end, the unchanging eternal truth. I dwell within all beings as the pure consciousness, the ground of all phenomena, internal and external. I am both the enjoyer and that which is enjoyed. In the days of my ignorance, I used to think of these as being separate from myself. Now I know that I am all. That is the basis. And also these people, when they come back, or after they have this experience, or when they realize that they are one with all, or that they are God, they know that they cannot explain it using words. So they use parables, they use poems. And have you ever thought about something that is really interesting? Jesus did not write a word. He knew how to read and write.
Yeah,
he
true.
never wrote anything.
Use
Buddha
parables.
did not write anything.
That's true.
And Krishna did not write anything. And even Muhammad, he did not write the Quran. He talked about it, but he did not write it down. It was written down after he died. According to the Zen Buddhists, whatever you say, and according to the Taoists, whatever you say about God or the reality is going to be inexact and wrong. You cannot express it in words. You can suggest it. You can say, it is like witnessing a beautiful sunrise and being swept away in a thoughtless sensation of being one with all. Okay, you can more or less explain it that way, like Rumi did many times. Like he said something like this: the ocean has many drops of water, but each drop of water also contains the whole ocean.
Yeah.
Something like that. But these founders of religions, they did not try to create a dogma. They tried to show a path. And my conclusion is that the basic teaching of all religions is there is a true reality, the true reality of God, which is non-dual. There is an illusory reality, which is dual, and that's where this material world exists. And the basic teaching is to identify these two and to tell them apart.
Easier said than done, but yeah, that's the idea. So can I ask you, what's your idea of God these days?
Well, God is the same one. God is within me. We are all God, having human experiences. Not only human experiences, God is having, if you take a subatomic particle, God, in that case, God is having a subatomic particle experience.
Nice.
You take a rock, it's God having a rock experience. If you see a galaxy, it's God having a galaxy experience. We are made of trillions of cells. We're not aware of these cells, but we are also like a cell of God, and we are all interconnected. And God, we can use the word God, he has no name, or his name is beyond anything we can imagine. And in that dimension, there is no verbal language. It's all telepathic.
Yeah.
So they don't really use names. However, we need to use a name, my microphone, if I want to refer to my microphone, Dani, you're Dani. Yeah, I'm using a name. But are you really Dani? You're not really Dani. You're God having a human experience.
A Dani experience.
A Dani experience. And someone decided to call you Dani, not you. You're not really Dani. And to those people who feel that they are frustrated or that they have failed in life or whatever, that's bull. That's not really true. There is nothing. You cannot fail.
Yeah, there's nothing to lose.
You don't really have to do anything.
Yeah.
You have to exist and make things easier for you. You don't have to worry that much. You have to accept that everything has a shadow. You're good, but you also have bad things. Well, okay, you learn to live with them. But you cannot be fighting against you all the time. or blaming yourself or blaming others. And you need to stop thinking that other religions are wrong and that only yours is right. No, it's all a matter of perspective. This is all part of the Tower of Babel syndrome.
Yeah.
The Tower of Babel syndrome makes us believe that our interpretation of reality is the only one that is true.
Brilliant. Love that. Can I ask you, AJ, to those who have not had any other experience or any type of spiritual transformative experience, what do you recommend them to do to start to maybe come to terms with the notion of an afterlife?
Well, what I did was I started researching and interviewing, but if you're not a journalist and you don't want to interview people, there are a lot of videos on YouTube, and there's also something that happens when you start hearing these stories. Basically, when you start hearing about life reviews, it personally affects you. It doesn't matter. You don't have to go through a life review to understand its significance. If you listen to enough life review story, you will notice that people from different parts of the world had more or less the same experience. You get to experience what you did to others, and you see it from your perspective, but also from the perspective of the person you did that thing to.
Amazing.
If you hurt someone, you will feel, you will experience yourself hurting that person, but you will also experience what that person felt when you were hurting that person. So that is a very transformative realization. And that was one of the major consequences after interviewing people, but you don't really have to interview them. If you listen to enough near-death experiences, you will notice that they are quite different. However, they have common traits, and they prove that life goes on. They prove that the only one that is going to judge you is yourself. They prove that there are loving beings in the other side. They also prove that our loved ones are alive. And they also prove that when someone dies, they are still alive in another dimension, but they never die. So that, I would say, read my books, watch my channel, watch Dani's channel, and watch, so many other channels that are bringing these stories, and try to learn as much as you can. That's basically what I can recommend, because it's not a matter of telling you, look, you have to believe this, you have to believe that. No. You'll end up believing what you need to believe if you start researching. What does researching mean? Well, start watching, watch 50 videos, watch 20, 30 videos, analyze them, see the common elements, and then you will automatically reach a conclusion. And although you may be still scared, for example, I'm still scared of having a fatal disease and being 3 months or 3 years in a hospital suffering. I would rather die of a heart attack, which is instantaneously. So I'm scared of the way I am going to die, but I know that once I'm dead, I will be alive.
Yeah.
And I will see my deceased loved ones and all that. So it's not that I am not afraid of dying. Okay, I am not afraid of death, but I am afraid of the way.
Getting there. Yeah.
Getting there. Okay, for example, I'm in the middle of the road. A car hits me. I'm lying there. It's the middle of the night. Nobody comes to help me, and I spent 10 hours in the middle of the road without any help, slowly dying. That would be terrible. Or I get smashed. I don't know. There are horrible ways to die. I'm scared of that. So I'm not saying I'm not scared of anything. But I know that once I die, it will be okay. Also, we have a survival instinct inscribed in our DNA. We want to survive by any means. So I have that. Regarding death, that's my conclusion.
but you're not afraid of death, and that by itself, I think, it makes you have a completely different experience of life compared to the average person that assumes that consciousness is a byproduct of cerebral activity. So that by itself, the way that you get to live, you mentioned earlier the veil of illusion, which what Hindus call Maya, right? Being able to live this as if you already know it's a dream, and that we all end up waking up from the dream, obviously makes you enjoy this experience in a much fuller way, if you like, compared to the average. So that by itself, I think it's a great gift. AJ, I have one last question for you, and then I'll let you free.
Okay, I need to go, really. But
what's the meaning of life for you?
well, the meaning of life is one of those things that you cannot express in words, but my way of defining it, based on my experience and my knowledge, is our journey back home to the one. We have forgotten that we came from the one, and this life is a journey that will make us remember that we are God having a human experience, and that eventually we will go back to the essence. So that is basically, God is simply having fun, and we should be having fun with God too.
Yeah.
And realize that we need to remember who we really are, where we came from, and where we're going to. It's not a matter of discovering, it's a matter of remembering.
AJ, thank you so much. I'd have to give an award for the longest interview that we did so far. It's been brilliant. If people want to reach out to you, what can they do? Okay,
the best way is through my email, ajparr@gmail.com.
Yeah.
If you're writing a book and you want to publish your book, I can help you out with that. If you have any questions regarding NDEs, I also have an NDE Facebook group with over 140,000 members. And you can join, you can contact me, you can find my name. You can find my Facebook page by typing AJ Parr. You can also find my YouTube channel by typing AJ Parr. The channel's name is AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist. And you're welcome to write to me, and I will gladly write you back.
Brilliant. AJ, thank you so much. I will link everything in the description below. And yeah, wishing you all the best. Ciao, ciao for now. All right.
Thank you. Take care.
Oh, hi there. Well, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the IANDS community, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and maybe share with the ones you love. If you're looking for another video to watch, I think this could be a very good one. New episodes out every Friday, and until then, enjoy the stream we all call live, and live the love you wish to see in the world. Bye for now.